My own view is that, yes, by the summer of 22, we'll see a restoration of normality. By that I mean pre-COVID levels, not expanded as we were going by 7 or 8% per annum, but it'll be flatlined to where we were at the end of the last year in 2019.
I mean, I've heard some airlines, some of the legacy carriers, talk about shrinking 20, 30%.
Yeah, I think, to be quite honest, we'll be between 10 and 20% in the end. We are probably not quite the same as many airlines, because don't forget, most of our workforce is expatriate. And once they have left the United Arab Emirates and Dubai in particular, so it becomes far more difficult to get them back as quickly as we may need them.
What was your worst cash burn?
Oh, you've heard the same kind of figures. It's $1 million an hour, that kind of thing at one point. I think we were not dissimilar to some of the other big legacy full-service carriers, Lufthansa, Air France, KLM, you name it. We were all in these rather difficult situations, but we've arrested that. We've attended to costs in a very big way. Obviously, we don't face the operating costs of these aircraft, but by speaking to the debt providers in some instances and others in the mix of debt provision, we've been able to lay off quite a lot of this. So we're in good shape at the moment.
People talk a lot about opportunities. You'll have seen Alan Joyce when he did his capital raising. Buried at the bottom of the statement was, we want to prepare ourselves for such opportunities that will arise. And I know you've said something similar. What are those opportunities to which you were referring?
Well, I think you have to roll forward, Richard, until that time where the jury's out, or whether it's 22, 23, 24, 25. For a start, we have to all get through this horrifically tough time. Not all will get through that, as we're already witnessing. And in the absence of government support and bailouts, most of the airline industry today would be in bankruptcy. Let's be quite honest about it. But going forward, if we can survive all of this, I'm not one of those people that believe that there is going to be a new norm. In other words, that people will not travel, or their incidence of travel, their frequency of travel, their capacity to pay for travel will be compromised. I think that it's a little bit of a wake-up call at the moment, but one only has got to look at what happened, for instance, in the United Kingdom last week, or the week before, or during May, when they started to release the lockdown. 500,000 people headed for the beaches. And when they opened the bars and restaurants last week, so there were huge numbers turning out. The pressure to return to degrees of normality, notwithstanding the points I made about the science and medicine, my own belief is that people will come back. They will want to restore the way it was as best they can, because they experienced it, they savoured it, they enjoyed it. And in the case of air travel, it become very much part of their lifestyle. And it wasn't so aspirational as it might have been 20, 30 years ago. Now it's the way it is, and that's the way they want it back. That's the way I look at it. Secondly, without being too predatorial about it, my own view is there are going to be a significant number of carriers which will have difficulty in mounting long-haul operations, because the risk associated with that, and therefore, with the amount of debt that's on the balance sheet, the concerns about cash, the risk-averse nature of boards, I would suggest that there's going to be a reduction in capacity as compared to what it was a year ago.
Anybody looking at the current situation of aviation in the region, in your region, says it makes sense for you and your neighbour Etihad to consolidate, to come together. I know that this is above your pay grade. This is being dealt with at much higher levels, which is saying something, bearing in mind how high you are to start with. But as an aviation man, you must surely see it makes sense for you and Etihad to merge.
I think, look, you're right about the pay grade. You're right about the decisions that will be taken. But let's be quite honest about this. The Etihad is already contracted to a shape and size where they will be, post-pandemic, much more fit for purpose. At the same time, with what's been going on in the last few months with this pandemic, Emirates is obviously adjusting what it's doing, the scale of what it does. And I believe that in a couple of years' time, both carriers will be well positioned to re-enter the markets on the basis of what I just said a few minutes ago, and do this profitably, incisively, with a high degree of focus, and at the same time keep themselves separate. Well, that's not to say that behind the scenes, where we don't contravene competition law in the West and everywhere else, that we do not work together. And both Tony Douglas and I had many chats about how we could share out the goods and services procurement into the business.
Just give me a feeling, a thought for what it was like in the midst. You've just shut down basically shut it down except for freight, and you've parked the planes. You've got virtually no revenue coming in of real size. You look around, and Sir Tim Clark thinks what?
So like everybody, rabbit in the headlights in the beginning, hoping that this would be going away in 3 to 4 weeks. Here we are 3.5 months, and it doesn't seem to really be getting any better. But I'm glad to see that we are doing as much as we can, which is physically possible given the constraints that we face. So I'm kind of getting fairly philosophical about it now. We are all working flat out, long hours to try and get this thing dealt with, even though we don't have a meaningful passenger operation. We used to have these planning scenarios where we would say, what would be the case if we were shut down through no fault of our own for 6 months or a year, But we used to plan that with regard to the cash management of the business. We never allowed us to go below 6 or 9 months red line. So we always had that cash. If we stopped the operation, could we actually continue to meet our obligations, both the finances, debt providers and the staff? Never did I believe in 1,000 years that we would actually be facing that horrific situation that we face at the moment. But thank God we did that, because we did actually prepare ourselves. And in many respects, that's given us a breather to map out what we're going to try and do. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. Emirates, with all that in place, will be as good in the future as it has been in the last 35 years. Take my word for it.